So welcome everybody to our workshop on proposal planning and writing with the Office of Research Development. I am Dr. Keith McCall. I'm the Assistant Director of the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards. I am joined by our soon-to-be graduated graduate assistant who just defended on Monday and is now Dr. Rouillet, who will be helping me keep an eye on the chat in the waiting room and recording today's meeting. So some of you might be here today because you have found a fellowship or grant that you plan to apply to, or as in the case of at least two people here, you are about to be done with your program and go out into the world of possibly industry or academia where you might have to be applying for non-student-oriented fellowships or grants. So some of you might know what you want to apply for. Others of you may not have any idea what you want to apply for. You might be in the process of looking for things to apply for, but for people in either of those situations, you probably realize that finding the thing to apply for is much easier than actually applying for that thing. So that's what we're going to help you get started with today, is thinking through what to do when you're faced with an application instruction and a blank Word document that you need to fill with sometimes many pages of important information. So I'm very pleased today to introduce our guest facilitator, Evangeline Coker, Research Development Coordinator with FSU's Office of Research Development. Evangeline and the team at the Office of Research Development work with faculty to prepare and review funding applications. I think I saw on your website that you reviewed about 170 applications across all of the different funding mechanisms you worked with last year. So that's a lot. I hope that many of those get funded in the next couple of months. So Evangeline and the others at the Office of Research Development are a big part of the reason that FSU was such a high research university. And so we are thrilled to have Evangeline with us today. She is going to talk with you about, share some of her knowledge to help you get started in the planning and writing process of applying for funding. So with that, I will turn it over to Evangeline and mute myself.
Thanks, Keith. All right, so I did not have, it wasn't a single-handed victory, all of those proposals that went in. We have a whole team that works together on them, but yeah, I did help with quite a few. And I'm just really excited to get to see everybody here and talk with you about what I've learned on the job and what I feel helps faculty be ready to write better proposals and understand the funding world better. So hopefully that translates for where you are. And it looks like we have quite a few doctoral students. So you'll be in that position soon. So the steps you take now are going to really set you up for success when you go on to postdoc and then hopefully assistant professor or researcher from there. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. It's been a bit since here we go, done a Zoom presentation. All right, so you should all be able to hopefully see my open slide, proposal planning, Evangeline Coker, Office of Research. Yes, awesome, thank you. Okay, so yeah, like Keith said, I'm Evangeline Coker, the Office of Research Development. Most of what I do connects with interdisciplinary team building and helping faculty from across the university come together with a shared vision and go for a large interdisciplinary project, a large grant. So I'm used to a lot of different moving pieces and a lot of different people having to juggle conflicts and all of that. So a single PI proposal, which is probably what you're looking forward to applying for, is going to look different in that it's going to be a little easier. It's just you, but a lot of the pieces that they're going to expect will be similar. So our goals for today are to articulate and understand your funding needs and desires, decode funding opportunities that you might be interested in, and then learn how to create a checklist, schedule, and outline for your proposal. Now, number 3 is deceptive. That can seem fairly simple. Oh, I know how to create checklists or I can schedule myself. But for a proposal, when you have a lot of different moving pieces, There are some good best practices I'll share. And Keith, I also have this time, I have my Excel ready for you. So I'm happy to share that with you if you want to disseminate to people, and you can see today how I break down a funding opportunity. And then you can take those skills and use it for your own funding opportunities. So that's what we hope to do today. All right, so first, you got to do your homework. You have to know yourself as a researcher, as a creative, as if I see a lot of people are here from the social sciences. I see quite a few from STEM and social work. Oh, none from education. Oh, well, that's okay. So could you please in chat, if you can, just share with me, I see we've got MA and PhD breakdown. Could you let me know, have you applied for funding before? Is this your first time? Are you here because you feel pressured by your advisor? Are you excited about this presentation? Were you bored and you just needed something to fill the next hour? Which, if that's you, I'm impressed you chose this. So thank you. But yeah, go ahead and drop that in the chat. First times. Okay. Yes, and some rejections. That's okay. That happens a lot. There are certain mechanisms in the National Institute for Health, for instance, where you're pretty much guaranteed not to get funded the first time. They expect repeat applications. So just because you didn't get it that first time doesn't say anything negative about your ability or your research direction. Don't give up. All right, cool. So let's get an idea of who we are. So you have probably many facets of your research self. And when I was thinking about facets, I thought about, crystals and how some of them grow facets organically over time, and they're different shapes and different colors. And then sometimes, if you've ever had a diamond ring, you have facets that are very perfected, intentional, set, and finite. So your research self might be one or the other, or you may feel like it's one or the other, that you're constantly growing and changing, or that you feel stuck in an area where you have to conform to certain standards in your discipline. So we're going to do an exercise. This is just between you and yourself, to know thyself. Go ahead, and if you want to open a Word doc to write in, or if you have a piece of paper and you want to write in, we're just going to do a quick exercise to make sure we know what our research self is and what it needs, because that's going to give us a good place to make smart, strategic decisions when we're looking for funding opportunities. So I want you to take the next 3 minutes, and it's going to go by quickly, and I want you to answer these questions as a researcher. And I know some people may be in the arts and go, well, I don't consider myself a researcher. You are a practitioner, or you're an artist. That I'm going to use those words interchangeably today. So think about your research self as your artist self, your practitioner self, your doer, your thinker. That's who you are. And it's made up of many different facets. It's what you want. It's your advisor. You may feel some pressure. That person might have expectations of what your research should look like. What does that person want? What does your department, or more broadly, your college, expect of you and your research pursuits? And then also, what does your field value? Hopefully, as a grad student, you've been exploring, learning about your field, going to some conferences, talking to some of your colleagues. You probably are starting to get a good sense of what the atmosphere of your discipline looks like, what your field looks like. What are the values there that you feel have become internalized and are part of your research self? So let's just take 3 minutes, take a moment, and write those out. All right, so hopefully you have some content there. You can start to see some of the influences on who you are as a researcher. What aspects you feel might be pressures and constraints, and what might be opportunities for growth. All right, now I want you to think about your time frame and your capacity. So getting a grant or a fellowship is not like getting a little diamond to put on your ring and then, okay, got it, stuck it on, and now I go about my day. This is going to be a time commitment. There are going to be deliverables expected of you. So being honest, knowing yourself and your time is very important. All right, so I want you to think about what your time frame is in getting to that grant submission process. Can you reasonably find a grant opportunity that's due in a month and actually put the work in to do it? It depends on the grant opportunity probably, but also on your time, what's expected of you. How busy are you right now? You know, can you commit 2 hours a day to this thing for the next 2 months? Think about that. What is my time frame? And go ahead and write that down as well. Time frame for proposal submission. And then think about, what is my time frame afterwards? For some of you, you may be graduating really soon. And so going for an opportunity that's only for a master's when you're about to graduate with your master's isn't going to work. It's going to come too quickly. You know, so think about where is my career going next? What eligibility will I have moving forward? And then also you want to think about your capacity. And by this, I'm talking about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses when it comes to working. Are you a self-starter? Can you get a massive grant opportunity and have it in your lap and go, okay, I know how to self-start these things. There are a lot of moving parts, but I'm great at juggling moving parts. Is that you? If so, go ahead and write that in. I'm a great multitasker. I can do complex things. If it's not, let's be aware of that, okay? Maybe your capacity is, hey, I need a schedule, or I need to make sure my mentor knows I'm going for this grant so that they can hold me accountable to getting it submitted. So think about those strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities for growth. And then lastly, go ahead and take that piece of paper. If you're writing it down, I would go ahead and put a little line down the middle of it. And on one side is your non-negotiables, the things that you are going to make sure you do in this grant or in your research. And then on the other side is your wish list. All right. So something I might put here with non-negotiables is I will not work on Saturday mornings. Maybe that's my kid's soccer game. And I have to know that no matter what, I'm not going to work on this grant Saturday mornings. Or maybe my non-negotiable is I will not take out, if education isn't here, but if it were education, I might say my non-negotiable is I want to work with elementary kids. So that's not just a wish list thing. That's where my research is. And I'm going to make sure that whatever it is, I'm working with elementary students. So go ahead and we'll take 2 minutes here, and I want you to fill out your non-negotiables list in your work, and then your wish list on the other side. What are some things you would love to be able to do? Get it all down, just have it on paper. All right, so 2 minutes, go ahead and do that. Okay, before we move forward, I know I said it's just for you, and it is, but if you want to share some insight you had in this process, feel free to write it in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand and share it with the group. Just remember it is being recorded, so if you share it publicly in the group, that might come through. So the chat is more just between all of us. But feel free if someone wants to share. Thank you, Honorine. Okay, we can cut that part out. Awesome. Thanks. Just wanted to make sure I was clarifying just in case. Any insights at all? Or they're so deep there, you're going to hold on to them and it's just for you. If so, that's okay. I would say one insight that I have had about myself is that I am very quick to jump into new things. I love learning, and that can be a strength, but it can also be a challenge because I can dive into a project because I care about it and not take that time to step back and reflect, do I actually have the time to do this project justice? So maybe you're like that. Yeah, same. Yes. Yeah, it's very easy to do, especially when you're working on your MA or your PhD. People want you to be involved in a lot of things. Does anybody feel pressured to get a grant at this point in their career? Yeah. Yeah. Is that pressure always? No. Oh, good for you. Okay, cool. Then you're here just because you want to be. That's awesome. Could you specify why is that? Are you saying why is it that you feel pressured, or why, if you don't mind, why is it that people feel pressured? That's a good question. If any of you are feeling that way and you want to put something that you feel comfortable putting as to why you feel pressured in the chat, go ahead and do that. I know for a lot of disciplines, grant money, fellowship money can make a big difference in your next job. You know, it's a very competitive market out there. And if you're going for a research job or a faculty position, you may be up against some steep competition. And if other people have fellowships and you don't, that could be the difference in whether they're hired or you're hired, or whether they get their foot in the door for that first interview or you do. Yeah, those are some good descriptions, Keith and Honorine. Thank you. This is good. This is good. Thank you, guys. And as we keep going, feel free to keep populating that chat. Say what you need to say. And I'm liking that story, Honorine, as well. Yeah, that's good. Good to be clear on that. I wish I'd started earlier. Yeah, so you guys haven't started yet and you're here. This is a great step that you're taking. All right, so now we've talked a bit about what we want, the different facets, those pressures or opportunities for growth that are in our research lives, and also been honest with ourselves, what our time frame is, what we're capable of doing, what are our non-negotiables, what's our wish list. And now I want you to take that paper. If you wrote it on paper, go ahead and flip it over so that you don't have to look at it. Or if you are on a Word doc, scroll to a blank page, okay? And we know those pressures are on us. We know our limitations, but I want you to take a moment to think outside the box for a second. My PowerPoint will work for me. Yay. All right, so set those aspects aside. We're going to dig a little deeper into you as a practitioner, a researcher, an artist. We can get so bogged down in all of these things, all of these pressures to get that funding, that sometimes we can forget why we're doing our research in the first place. And this is where I see a lot of grant projects die. My tombstone is there for a different reason, but it helps segue a bit. So I've seen some researchers get really excited about a dollar amount. There's some great National Science Foundation opportunity coming out and they just want to go for it. It's time to get this money. But what the funding opportunity is asking for is not what that person does. And so you see this weird chameleon shifting trying to happen, where they're trying to adapt themselves to the funding opportunity to the point where they lose the thread, and it comes out in the writing. It is really hard to hide if you are not the right researcher for that project. Sometimes, and we'll talk about it a little later, sometimes you do need to tweak certain things to make sure that you're aligning with the vision of your funder, but you shouldn't have to change everything about you, everything about your research, just because you need that grant. All right, so think about your vision, why you became a researcher, an artist in the first place. So I like cemeteries, they give me comfort and put things in perspective. And so we're going to do an exercise here that has to do with an obituary. All right, stay with me. Okay, so imagine 50 years from now, 70 if you're really young out there, you have passed away from natural causes. All right, and you have left a legacy with your research. How did your work, your research, your creative activity change blank? What was that it changed? It could be your field, it could be your community, it could be the world. You know, what did it change? How will your work be remembered? And I want you to take, there's no wrong answer here either. It can be sky's the limit. This is the time to dream big. So take 2 minutes and I want you to write your own research obituary. Type it in that blank paper, write it on that open sheet of paper. Or if you feel really like you want to take a risk, write it in the chat and post it for everybody to see. There's no right or wrong answer here. So 2 minutes. How did your research change the world? Okay, so we are coming up on time. Go ahead and stop the timer. So I gave you 1 minute and 50 seconds, but if you feel like you'd like to share that obituary of your research, feel free to put it in the chat. And I hope that through that exercise, you found that, oh yeah, I do kind of care what I'm doing. You know, I care about what I'm creating still. It's not gotten lost, I hope, in the piles of papers and requirements in where you are right now, that reason you started your research is still there and that you're able to dream big. Because believe it or not, as potentially touchy-feely as this exercise felt, this is going to get you to the heart of what funders are looking for. Nice. Thank you, Jack. That's awesome. So we have our interdisciplinary teams do this exercise with us sometimes, especially when we have them create research videos and pitches for funding. So they get a shared vision of what they're really aiming for. It's not just about, I will do a sample size of this, you know, population so that I can get a number that turns into data, the end, you know, but it's something further reaching than that. It's forward thinking, it's future focused. You're doing something, even if it seems small right now, that's going to lead to something life-changing in the future. So keep that in mind. All right, so remember to use that vision, that obituary you made, that is your long-term vision, right? And you can rewrite it sometimes. I encourage you to, when you're feeling a little lost, just, okay, how could my research, you know, change the world if there were no limits? Use that as a litmus of sorts when you see a funding opportunity. Honestly, in anything you're doing, you know, does this help further that vision? If it does, and it works with the other facets you're working with, go for it. If not, stop, and ask yourself, okay, is it worth pushing through and applying to that thing anyway, even if it's not aligned with my vision, even if it's not going to be great for every facet of myself, is it still worth going for? I don't want to tell you always say no to it, but you should pause at that moment and make sure you're aware of why you're going for something that isn't fully aligned with you. All right. So let's go forward. All right. So we're going to work on some project planning. Now, we just talked about our vision, our big future self doing great things, changing the world. You're probably, if you're changing something, that means that there was a problem that you're fixing. Otherwise, why would you change something that's working? There is a problem you're trying to solve. And for a funder, it's no longer about who you are, but it's about that way you're going to make the world a better place. They're not looking at the name, they're looking at your solution to a problem. All right, so whenever you're going for a funding opportunity, really understand that's what they want. So that's why it's so important to go for a funding opportunity that's in line with that vision. And remember that when you go for one, if you get it, you've got to keep doing it, right? So you need to be involved in something that's going to keep you motivated. And if it's aligned with that vision, it's going to carry you through. It can sustain your interest and your focus. All right, so as we're looking for our project, we're thinking, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And then we're thinking, who cares about that problem? Now, this is both who cares in your department. There may be professors there who are working on the same problem. That's a great person to collaborate with or to talk about. Hey, I'm interested in this problem too. I want to solve this as well. What conferences would you suggest I go to? What committees could I maybe sit in on? Ask them to help get you to that next level. Also, are these people who you could collaborate with? Is there a colleague who's also interested in this problem and solving it that you could team up with and apply for something with? And could they teach you something? And then you've got to ask yourself, who has the money, right? This is not just who's funding research, but who happens to be funding research in something that and cares about that something that aligns with your vision and that problem, right? Who cares about your problem and has money? Now, you can apply to national organizations, private organizations, corporations. FSU has funding opportunities as well. If you're wondering what those are, you are in the right office to ask. The graduate school here has so many tools that they can help you connect with funding opportunities through. And one that we share with faculty a lot, which graduate students are also able to have access to, is Pivot. So Pivot is a database of funding, and I've given presentations on how to use Pivot before. I bet you Agfa is also able to help with that. Keith says yes. Absolutely awesome. So I'm not going to spend time walking you through Pivot today, but it is kind of like the Amazon of funding opportunities. It has a great advanced search option where you can put in different parameters and it will show you probably more than you want to know about different funders and different opportunities coming up. And thank you, Honorine. It's great. I love using Pivot. I would always make sure you verify every funding opportunity that you find. Make sure you go to the source and that organization's website, but Pivot is a wonderful starting point. And as long as you have an @fsu.edu account, you can set up a Pivot account. And that also counts for anybody who's in the FAMU FSU College of Engineering, since you have FAMU FSU at FAMU FSU EDU, it works as well. So go to Pivot, go to OGFA, you know, do your searches and find those organizations that are funding people solving the problem you want to solve. They care about it. They have money, and get to know those organizations. You know, so if you see a funding opportunity, you're interested in it, go to that organization's website and read their about. Or if it's something really large like the National Science Foundation or the National Endowment for Humanities, each of their funding opportunities may have its own mission statement within it. So you can read that specific mission. The funding is set aside to achieve blank. Does that match? Because that's what they're there to do. That's what they care about. So make sure that that aligns with your vision. And if it doesn't 100%, or maybe it's 80%, that's okay. You can shift a little bit and explore a facet of your research through that funding opportunity. But just remember, if your vision is climate resilience and their mission is enhancing educational opportunities in the arts, I don't know that you're a winner there. It's going to take a lot of work. Keith is like, yeah, it's probably best to find something that's closer to climate, right? If that's what you want to do. So read the program's mission statements and goals. What have they funded in the past? If they have past successful projects, take a moment to look at those, see what types of projects are getting the money. Obviously, they're not going to fund the exact same thing twice, right? So keep an eye out for that. But if you're seeing a through line in values, in strategies, even in locations, then be aware of that, because that could be a competitive advantage for you. You might notice that they funded something that is a step behind where you want to be. And that's great intelligence to have, because then you can say, well, I'm going to do something more. I'm moving beyond, you know. So also I wrote a note in here to ask, who's the program officer? So they're called different names in different organizations, but in NSF, where I've focused quite a bit, we call them program officers. And those are individuals who are basically running that program that is asking for your proposals for that funding opportunity. It's good to know who that person is, and it's good to find a way in to ask them a question, send an email. I wouldn't cold email them out of the blue and just say, hey, what's up? I want some money. How do I get started? That's not a good idea. Remember, emails are kind of forever, and a relationship with a program officer can be very valuable. But you want to make sure you start off on the right foot. So don't cold call them, email them with a real question, a thoughtful one that the opportunity announcement doesn't answer. All right. Prove that you've read the material they painstakingly put together, and you still have one question. Sometimes, you know, if you feel like your research is 80% of what they're looking for, but you're not quite sure, you might ask about, hey, this is what my research is about, and I see that this funding opportunity may be a possibility for me, but I had a couple clarifying questions if you have a moment. Treat them with respect, don't bog them down, give them some space, but making that connection with the program officer can give you some great intel that you can't get from just the program opportunity announcement. So we found an opportunity that is the problem you're trying to solve. You found someone who cares, and you have someone who cares, who has money and is trying to solve that problem. 1 and 2 and 3, you found your RFP. Now, RFP, I use a lot of acronyms in my job, and so I'm trying as much as I can to say the full title of things. So RFP means request for proposals. And a lot of opportunities are listed as RFPs, request for proposals. You'll also see some other common ones like NOFOs, which are notice of funding opportunity. I call them NOFOs. And then there are also funding opportunity announcements, FOAs. So call it an RFP, call it a NOFO, call it an FOA. It is the full solicitation for that funding opportunity that will tell you all the rules you need to follow when you go to submit a proposal. I'll probably end up calling it RFP throughout the rest of the day. So, all right, we found our RFP. We're ready to dive in, but wait, don't do it quite yet. You need to check a couple things. Be honest with yourself. How does that RFP stack up with your list? The list that we wrote down. Look at that page. Look at yourself. Now, you can't wait for it to be perfect. You may have to adapt what you do to fit the RFP a little bit. Don't change everything about you, but you might have to adapt, and know that you are adapting and why. All right. Also, are you eligible? This is a basic one. Every RFP has in it, hopefully, if it's written well, eligibility requirements. Keep an eye on that, because some can be a little tricky. Some are just for full faculty. Some are just for PhD students. Some are for PhD students who haven't graduated yet, but who have completed all the requirements to graduate. A very fine window. Some are for early career faculty or postdocs. So make sure you know your eligibility. All right. Do you have enough time to submit? Those are the two things I look at every time I look at an RFP. You know, am I eligible, and what's the deadline? Do I have time to make this happen? And then also ask yourself, do you have the capacity to carry out that project if you're funded? So, to thine own self be true. And I think now we're ready to dive into proposal planning. All right, so what I want to do today with the rest of the time that we have is take a look at a sample RFP and see how we would break that down, and then how we would turn that into a checklist, a timeline, and an outline. So before you write your proposal, take time to plan it out. So we call that in the biz of research development, shredding a proposal. It is time to shred that proposal. So carefully read the entire RFP or your NOFO, FOA, and I want you to take a highlighter. I usually print them out because I am a tactile person. I like to hold my RFP and I like to hold my highlighters. And you need to highlight all the requirements, because you may notice some of these documents, I pulled a few today and I was trying to decide which ones to share. A couple are 4 pages long, the RFP. One was 22 pages. And so you may find that they fill that RFP with a lot of content that it's not quite clear on its face if it's vital or not. So take that highlighter and you start making notes. All right, highlight every requirement, any must statement, should, expected. Highlight your deadlines. Highlight that scoring criteria. They'll say within those RFPs usually what the scoring parameters will be, what the panel of judges will be judging you on. Those reviewers, they're called different things in different areas, but what your reviewers will be scoring you on. Keep in mind what those are and make sure that when you read your own proposal, and possibly I highly suggest having some time to let your faculty advisor read that proposal as well, that it stands up to that scoring criteria. And also highlight that all the documents and materials that are expected are there. So what I want to do here is I'm going to stop sharing this and start sharing sample RFP for you guys to give you an idea of what this stuff looks like. So it'll take me just a sec to get my Get my windows right. Who doesn't like Amazon, right? So easy to search. While I'm moving windows around, I'm happy to open it for questions real quickly. I moved y'all over here to this screen, so I'm sorry, I'm looking over here now to see you. Feel free to put questions in the chat or unmute yourself while I pull this up. Minimize this. So one opportunity I found was the Data Fluency's dissertation grants for Social Science Research Council. See, a lot of people here are from social sciences. So hopefully this is fun for you. So I'll go ahead and share a full screen here. So you should see that website. Let me move that poll out of the way and move you guys out of the way. Can you see? You should just see a web page. It says Data Fluency's dissertation grants. Yeah, I see some nods. Thank you. Awesome. All right, so this is an opportunity that came up in a search that I did. And you can see on here, it's with the Social Science Research Council. And they give you a quick idea of what this opportunity offers. I love that they have a grant snapshot. I would take a moment and take a look at that. Okay, my deadline is March 15th, 2023. Darn it. But we're going to go through it anyway, just to give you some practice. Obviously, this would be the moment where you say, no go, because the deadline has passed. But let's say that this is March 15th, 2024. Oh, wow, I have so much time. Obviously, I'm going to take a moment to check this RFP out. So they give you a grant snapshot, dissertation research grant supporting PhD candidates working on projects that mobilize new knowledge and aim to foster more just and equitable futures in the realm of data. Projects should be of 6 to 12 months duration. Okay, so your antenna should be alert right now. This is going to require me to create a project that lasts 6 to 12 months. Do I have the bandwidth to do that? Also, your eligibility. It supports PhD candidates. Am I a PhD candidate? Am I working on a project here that mobilizes new knowledge and foster more just and equitable futures? If you're answering yes, 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 great, awesome. I need to learn more. So down here we see we have the PDF for the call for applications, the CFA. They did not call it a NOFO or an RFP, but this is what you want. Frequently asked questions can be very helpful as well, because you can get some extra intelligence that they don't write about. These usually come from emails people ask the program officer, and then they become those FAQs. Very helpful, but I wouldn't look at those first. I'd go ahead and look at your the PDF, the call for applications, which I have pulled up here. All right, so let's take a look at this. I'm gonna modify it to fit your screen, I hope. All right, so everyone should see the call for applications. This is the PDF. This is where all the rules are, or you hope all of them are. Sometimes they have links within them that ask you to double check other lists of requirements. So keep an eye on that. But first thing I want to do is shred this, what are we calling it? Call for applications, this CFA. So I'm going to go through, I'd usually have it printed out, but I'm going to just use my highlighter tool instead. And I'm going to look through this thing. All right, so my deadline is March 15th. Contact info, this is good to know. Please direct all inquiries to, I'm going to want to save that email. And then overview. They talk about what this project is. We seek to support projects that mobilize new knowledge, aim to foster more just and equitable futures. Possible topics of interest include, note they say possible, so there is some wiggle room if you don't quite fit these topics, but you want to make sure you know this. I'm going to call it an RFP just for my own mental peace of mind. Make sure you know this RFP backward and forward if you feel like you don't quite fit one of those topics of interest. But I would go ahead and highlight the topics of interest. And I'm going to change my highlight color here to purple because I have my own color coding highlighting scheme. If it's a yellow, it's a must or a should. If it's purple, for me, that's more good intel to know, but not a requirement. We are particularly interested in supporting projects that center alternative epistemology stemming from feminist, indigenous, or Black theoretical perspectives. Particularly interested, that shows a bias. So keep in mind potential biases. They're going to be your ticket to being more strategic and more competitive in this process. Say you are in one of those categories. Hey, my epistemologies stem from indigenous perspectives. Awesome. They're already really wanting to know what you have to say. There's a great opening there. So I'm highlighting that in purple. All right. This is about gender support and partnership. Please visit our application portal to apply. So when I'm ready to apply, I need to go to that application portal. That is a yes, yellow. And applications will be accepted up to the deadline of March 15th. I have that there, but I want to remind myself, okay, they give me till almost midnight. That's good. 5 dissertation projects will be awarded for up to $15,000 per award. When it comes to budgets, you want to make sure that your project is compatible with the budget. If you know that you can't get this project done for any less than $30,000, you need to refigure it. You know, you could still try to go for this and go for a slice of your project, ask for a piece of your project to be funded. But if you're coming up to them with a $30,000 award budget for something where they won't give you any more than 15,000, they're going to laugh at you. So make sure that you pay attention to those dollar amounts and that you follow those as closely as possible. Also, make sure you're not padding your budget just to hit that magic number. So you really had a project that only cost $500, but they're offering 15,000. So let me just add money in important places. No, make sure you're being respectful of their process and of their money, and that you're doing something meaningful with those dollars. All right. So eligibility, told you eligibility is super important. Says here, the Data Fluency's dissertation grant is open to PhD students who are, I gotta be a PhD student, who are actively enrolled in doctoral programs in the United States and Canada, regardless of citizenship. Awesome. If you're an international student, you can still apply for this, as long as you're enrolled in a doctoral program in US or Canada. Applicants to the program should have completed all PhD coursework and reached ABD status by the beginning of the grant term. So by that, they mean by the time you start your grant, you got to be ABD. So there's a window there. You have to still be enrolled as a PhD student, but ABD. All right, so I would definitely write that in yellow as a requirement. Applicants who are selected to receive the fellowship should indicate whether the project has already obtained approval from an institutional ethics committee, the university's IRB. These are great acronyms to ask OGFA about as well. Our IRB is our human subjects research. If you are working with people as volunteers or as test subjects, you have certain levels of approval at the university you have to go through because we have to make sure they're kept safe and that there's a process in place so that there's no unethical conduct. You know, gotta cross all our T's, dot our I's, keep everybody safe and healthy. And whether you know for sure, well, of course I would be nice to people, we have to have the paperwork in order as well. So I got to make sure I obtain approval from our ethics committee if it involves human beings. However, institutional ethics review approval is not required at the time of application. That's nice. Great. All right, application requirements. Now you see here, they give you some sections. I love this opportunity that's so clear and it's so short. Honestly, this is the shortest grant opportunity I've read ever. Okay, so your application requirements, we have headings, research proposal, no more than 5 pages long. Ooh, they are very specific, single spaced, not including selected bibliography. This project description must include, clear research questions, the main theoretical or empirical contributions of your research. You can read along with me too. I know it must, so I'm going to highlight it. CV, we need a maximum 2-page curriculum vitae. And it tells you should identify current and recent appointments, education, most relevant scholarly activities. Why it would inform reviewers about your capacity to accomplish the proposed activities, including related technical skills and research projects. So you need to be very specific what you choose to include in that CV. Selected bibliography, relevant to the research, and should be, there's your should. All right, so that's a rule, max of 3 pages. You may use whichever standardized citation style you like. Oh, thank goodness. All right, budget. 1-page itemized budget narrative. So eligible expenses include, but are not limited to, which I love. Salary support, all these elements. So eligible expenses include, but are not limited to. I'm going to keep that in yellow because I know it can include this. Not limited to, that's good to know. Note, oh, well, actually, let me make this note because I'm going so quickly. My budget, I like to put in green. Now this becomes way more helpful when you're working on a 22-page RFP as opposed to a 4-page. Having those color codings can help you leaf through it real quickly to find what you need. In something like this, it's much simpler. So these are some of the eligible expenses. Note, awards are made to individuals, but if routed through institutions after consultation with this organization, institutions cannot request direct cost recovery or overhead. Ooh, Keith, isn't this fun? Overhead, awesome. All right, so this is probably going to get too much in the weeds for what we're trying to do. If you see something like indirect cost or overhead, check in with your department rep or with OGFA, or feel free to give me a call. I would say probably OGFA first. They could probably route you to the right people. Keith, please correct me if I'm off base.
Yeah, no, I'll just say it's rare that we work on things that do include, that do allow grad funding to go to indirect costs for the university. Most do not want their funding going to the university.
Awesome. Then I won't even go into it.
To get it directly.
Yes, that's fantastic. Great. This would be a 10-minute conversation with faculty, but for you guys, you get a break. So cool. Don't worry about that. Research schedule. They want you to submit a document that is a 1-page timeline of activities between 6 and 12 months. And we change our color because this is not about budget. I love colors. All right. And then your application form. In the application portal, you should be prepared to provide these things. Brief descriptive title and abstract for a non-specialist audience, statement of motivation, and ethical and privacy considerations. So even though there will be spots for you in the application form to write those in as you're applying, it's good to know that's what's going to be expected so you can start to craft something in advance. Also, if this portal allows you to check it out before submission, go do that. Be careful. You don't want to accidentally submit a rough draft, but find out more about, okay, what do they mean by brief, descriptive, and abstract? That's going to be important. So to submit a proposal and view the required application form, look at this. They're answering all my questions before I can get to them. This is fantastic. All right. So you can actually view your application form and from there get some more intel about that. Now they talk about selection criteria. This is very important. All right, this is what you will be judged on. So it's great to know that I'm not just writing a narrative here with my research questions and empirical or theoretical contributions, but I'm doing so with an eye on how it's going to be judged. I'm sure you've probably done this when you're in a class and you have a paper you have to submit. And if there are requirements that your professor gives, you pay close attention to those because you know that's probably going to reflect that person's rubric when they go and grade you. So I would see the selection criteria almost like a rubric, only we often don't get percents in this. All right, so they will be evaluated by a multidisciplinary cross-regional review committee. That's good to know. For the sake of time, okay, yeah, we've just got one more page. So if I were looking at this myself, I go, this is wonderful. And these people are going to know and care about this topic, but they're going to be from all over. So it's really important when I see multidisciplinary and cross-regional that I steer clear of things that might be too technical or draw a dividing line between me, my expertise, and my review committee. So keep in mind, they're not all from your field. They're multidisciplinary. Your proposal should display a thorough knowledge of the major concepts, theories, and methods. All right. You should provide evidence of having attained an appropriate level of training to undertake the proposed research, including evidence of a degree of language fluency sufficient to complete the project. Here's the review criteria. So that's not even the criteria, that's the selection criteria, and now review criteria, but all of it's going to be important to know. All of it, if you can show that you fit in every one of those yellow spaces, it's going to make you more competitive. All right, so with review criteria, intellectual merit, feasibility, qualifications, ethics, and privacy. Great, and I can read more about that later, but for the sake of what we're doing, now we have shredded this RFP. Super simple, short, it's great. For the sake of time, I won't go through the others, but just to give you a heads up, this is what one might look like in NEA, the National Endowment for the Humanities fellowships. Now, this one is coming up really soon, but I pulled this up as a potential other example. This is the one that's 22 pages. So it's good to have a quick idea of, you know, okay, overview, eligibility, application requirements, review criteria. And then when you dive in here, don't get too scared, but take some time to sit down with your highlighters and really understand this thing. One thing I love about NEH is they've got a table of contents. That's great. So you can see their program description, what their purpose is. That's their vision. Does their vision align with what your vision is? All right. Eligibility information, eligible applicants. You want to check that out. Am I eligible? Other eligibility information. Read that as well. Should probably read cover to cover, but just so you know, these are the things I would pay extra close attention to. Once you know you're eligible and the timeline works for you, go into that application and submission information, application package, the dates and times of submission, your review criteria here for just to have some fun. Oh, it's not going to drop me down. Review criteria is on page 15. I'll just give you a quick view of that. So say I was going to highlight this. Review criteria, peer reviewers will use the following criteria. The intellectual significance of the proposed project, including its value to humanities scholars, general audiences, or both. Okay, value to humanities scholars, general audiences, or both. Intellectual significance. Got to have that as well. The quality of the conception, definition, organization, and description of the project, and the applicant's clarity of expression. All right, so I have to make sure I am clear in how I'm expressing what I'm doing, and that I have high quality description, organization, definition, conception of my project. Feasibility and appropriateness. You want to make sure that this thing is going to look feasible to everyone. And remember that, you know, even though our data fluencies one is being judged by a panel of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary reviewers, they're still going to know something about that topic. Something like the National Endowment for the Humanities is going to know a lot more about your topics. You're getting narrower here. So make sure that they'll know whether it's feasible and appropriate or not. The quality or promise of quality of the applicant as an interpreter of the humanities. And likelihood that the applicant will complete the project, not necessarily during period of performance. All right, so this is all important. So as I'm writing my proposal, after I've shredded the rest of this RFP, I want to keep in mind as well how they're reviewing everything. So I don't slip into unclear expressions of what I'm doing. I want to make it clear all the time because I know that's going to be one of their criteria. I want to make it feasible, you know, so this is how it would look in a different RFP. All right, so getting back to our CFA, we've shredded it. Now I want to stop share, and I'm going to show you how I turn that into a outline and a timeline. Do we have any questions? I know I'm just in my own statement of motivation. Yeah, I like that too. All right, so my example here is from another proposal that we've worked on. So it's going to look a little scary for a moment. Bear with me. But you should see here, I've taken my screen, and hopefully what you see is on the left side, we have the CFA. On the right side, we have an Excel with lots of different colored bars. Oh, I see. Marie, are the reviewing criteria the same thing as the scoring criteria? Ooh, that's a good question. Thank you, Keith. Yes. Yeah, some funding mechanisms, especially federal grants, will detail how many points you earn for each section. Thank you. And so that would be in your RFP. Awesome. Cool. Good things happening in chat. I love it. All right, so this is a proposal document checklist. This is what I'll share out to the group. This helps keep track of all of the documentation that you're going to need as you move forward in your proposal process. You know, it may be something simple. It may be that you're submitting 20 different documents, 30 different documents, and you have to keep track of everything. Luckily, you're probably in a situation where you don't have that many, but it's good to have it all in one place. So here's one from another grant opportunity where we knew we needed a project description, budget justification, facilities, and it goes down the line. I know this is probably very small for you guys, but in brief, what I have here, and now this is meant for teams, but you can adapt it for a single PI or principal investigator, single researcher, or fellowship applicant, whatever you call yourself in your field. So it is adaptable. So what I have here is a column for the document name, a notes column next to that, assigned to obtain. If I'm working with a team, we have different people taking different aspects of this project and taking care of it, and then the status. So you might take out that assigned to obtain column because it's probably just you. But if you're working with someone else, this is a great document to share and work off of together. All right, so I'm going to look at my call for applications, and let's go to documents. All right, application requirements requires an application form and the following. All right, so research proposal. That is my 5 single space page proposal. So instead of it being called a project description, I'll call it a research proposal. And I would change this tab to say research proposal, and then my project description down here, change it to say research proposal. Always use the terms they use. always put things in the order they ask you to put them in. This is going to make it much easier for them. They won't hate you, and some places can throw you out if any little thing is off, because they get way too many proposals to read, not enough time. And so, oh, you didn't put budget as number 4 instead of number 2. So, well, that's an easy one. I don't have to keep reading. So match their layouts. It's very important. So research proposal, we've got a CV. So I'm going to create a new line, and this is where I'll probably put this. I like to make everything a different color, and this is CV, is what they call it. And I'll get rid of all the extra lines, but you can see from here what I'm doing. Selected bibliography, budget, 1-page itemized budget narrative. All right, cool. So in all of this too, I don't think this is going to let me copy it, but what I would do is go through and copy and paste in here. If you're looking at an HTML format of it, that can be really much easier, but 1-page itemized narrative. All right. Eligible expenses include, and I may put that in there as well. Eligible expenses, and write that in my Excel. All right. And then research schedule, I would change all of this to, you get what I'm saying here, to match every form that they need. All right. Now, research proposal has more elements than just, oh, it's a research proposal. It wants you to have certain things in it. Now, for that, I would create a new tab that is just about that document. Some proposals call it a narrative section. And so some call it a project description, but this is going to be the section where you need to write in a narrative form about your research. I like to make that its own Excel tab so I can flesh it out. And there are usually a lot of musts and shoulds and shouldn'ts in that section. So I want to make sure that it has its own space. All right, so research proposal and no more than 5 single-space pages, not including the bibliography. Project description must include. So this is your project description. See, they call it research proposal, but in the end, it is a project description too. Nice. All right. Clear research questions. The main theoretical and empirical contributions of your research, description of the data and methods will be used. All right, so we have all these sections. So if I wanted to give them titles, some of them, it's very specific. They must have titles. Here, this may be a little different. And perhaps this might be one reason to reach out to the program officer and ask, or check the FAQs first. Should these sections have titles in them, or are they just broken out by paragraph? That's a good question. Let's say that that person gave you very specific titles and headings just for the sake of the Excel. I want clear research questions. Must contain clear research questions, right? The main theoretical and empirical contributions of your research. Not going to write it all out for you, but a description of data and methods, right? Data and methods. And description of any related project work done to date, brief public dissemination plan. So that dissemination plan, I'll probably, what I'm trying to do is give you an idea of how this would break out. If each of these was supposed to be its own section, I'd create it as its own section over here. And then if it gave you more specifics, I'd put the specifics in the must contain over here. So my public dissemination plan, I put here, and say that after that, they gave you a note. Public dissemination plan must include I could say a lot of things. It must include an engagement mission statement for your, for a specific group of people, or it must include a media plan or something like that. You would include that. So maybe they need media formatting. They want to know exactly what's going to be in there. Maybe they're asking for that public dissemination plan to have a target population. So I want to make sure I hit that. So this is basically to keep you in line as you're writing out your proposal. Again, we're working on the probably easiest one I've ever seen, but this is good kind of grounding work for you as you move on into something bigger and something else. So with something like this, I'll just show you these real quickly, and I know Agfa is here to help. I'm happy to answer questions too, but also on this, you'll get a sample schedule. Now, I didn't flesh this whole thing out because it has to do with your individual proposal. Let me go ahead. We don't need this guy anymore. We'll do this so you can see it easier. I know you're probably looking at it on small screens. All right, so let me give you an example schedule. This is if I'm working with a team. And we have a lot of different red teams or pink team reviews. I don't know if that means anything to you, and that is okay, because this is for a large proposal process with lots of different moving parts. But this is a sample schedule with a proposal due date, identified as a box, a colorful box. I gave it green, so I didn't feel too intimidated by reds. But basically what you want to do is create yourself a schedule, and Excel can be a great way to do this. You start with the date of that your proposal is due, and you want to work your way backwards. So this is a 30-day process, and within it I have different steps here. And I also blocked out weekends. This is if I were working in my regular capacity with a team. I'm not going to ask them or ask myself to do weekend work. And part of the reason, like you might say, oh, work-life balance. Yeah, sure. But a big part of the reason is that you need to schedule in buffer time, because things will take longer than you think they will. And you may run into some snafus you didn't expect, and you have to pivot and work on something over time. So the weekend is my buffer time. It's not a complete no work time. All right, but make yourself a calendar, and maybe this calendar looks like Outlook calendar reminders. Maybe it looks like an Excel like this one, but you can see I've reviewed and analyzed the RFP. Now this is again for a large team, so you wouldn't use every single one of these terms, but for your regular schedule, it might be review, receive and analyze RFP, want to shred my proposal, set my proposal schedule, create the outline, collect and submit questions. I have a first draft. Maybe I give myself, 10 days to write that first draft, or maybe I give myself 5 days, depending on the length. Give yourself time to develop graphics if they require graphics. Don't forget those. That's not something to just throw together at the last minute, because graphics help translate what you're talking about for your audience. And your reviewers are really going to appreciate that when they're reviewing your proposal at 2 a.m. along with 5 others during their full-time job. Graphics help. If you're allowed to use them well. Budget justification. Maybe you have a second draft factored in. Maybe you can create a red team review. That would be a group of people who are experts in your field. Perhaps it's your advisor and maybe a couple colleagues, or your advisor and another professor who might be willing to serve as a red team for you, review your draft and give you feedback. Be gracious with feedback. It will help them want to be reviewers for you in the future. And even if you don't agree, all feedback is good feedback. You can use it to strengthen your proposal. Even if you think they're totally off base because they didn't understand what I was talking about, that might be something to remember. Oh, they didn't understand. That's not their fault. I need to try to be clearer for that audience. So be nice to your reviewers, but if you have time to schedule a review, do so. And do build in buffer time to edit your proposal after the review. Also making sure that you give yourself a window between your sending day and the proposal due date. You know, most things are online today, but there have been times, and it's happened with NSF Engine's proposal is a good example. It was a giant multi-million-dollar proposal, and it was from a new directorate they'd created, and the portal crashed during the submission phase. Now they had to scramble to try to make things work, but you want to build in buffer time in case something happens, because our internet is not, you know, shatterproof right now. So give yourself a window for submitting. But anyway, so make yourself a schedule, working backwards. Give yourself a project description checklist and a document checklist based on that RFP, and you should be ready to start writing.